Oliver and the Stardust by Mallory Leigh. Read by Mallory Leigh. There was only one sleep to go, just one sleep, and Oliver was going to see the rocket launch. He was going to see the world's most famous spaceman, Colonel Simpkins, blast into space on another brave mission. Oliver turned on the TV news to see the latest from the launch pad. The cameras panned to show Colonel Simpkins' equally famous space rocket, the Stevenson, glistening red and blue in the evening sunshine. Tomorrow, the Stevenson would launch Colonel Simpkins off the planet, and Oliver would be there to see it. The TV cameras moved from the Stevenson to the faces of some glum men with white coats and boring ties. How could they be unhappy? Colonel Simpkins was about to go into space. Oliver turned up the volume and listened closely. "I'm afraid it looks like tomorrow's launch will have to be cancelled," said a man in a white coat. "Good grief, what has happened?" asked a woman with a microphone. "As you know," replied the man in the white coat, "rockets run on Stardust. And, well, we've run out. There's no more left anywhere in the world." Oliver sat open-mouthed. How could this have happened? This was a disaster. He stood up and went to his thinking chair. Because never before has anything been more in need of a good think. He bounced on the chair 5 times to give all his ideas a good shake, and then sat upside down so they would fall into his head. After 10 minutes he knew what he had to do. He had to get some stardust himself. As everybody knows, stardust is the fine powder that floats in space and makes stars twinkle. So Oliver would just have to go into space himself to get some. He would need to get his own rocket, and whilst he might not have many white coats and boring ties to help him, he did have the following to hand: a small table, a large cardboard box, a waste paper bin, a red and blue blanket, his cycling helmet, his school lunch box, and his duck. This seemed more than enough to get started, so Oliver got started. The cardboard box had plenty of room for Oliver to climb in and pilot, but rockets needed to be tall so they didn't have to travel so far. Oliver placed a small table on top of the box, and then the upturned bin on top of that. Now, not only was this rocket tall, it was also pointy, so it could push through the clouds. One final touch was required, and Oliver draped his red and blue blanket over the structure. "Are we ready to go, Ducky?" asked Oliver. Ducky was in charge of ground control. "Quack!" "Good thinking, Ducky," said Oliver, and put his cycling helmet on, slid his school lunchbox into the rocket, and then finally slipped in himself. "Initiate launch sequence." "Quack!" Oliver got himself comfortable and then started the sequence. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "We have liftoff!" "Quack!" Oliver felt himself being pressed to the floor of the box as the rocket surged upwards. He heard a loud rumble of his bedroom ceiling as it opened to allow the rocket into the sky above. Faster and faster the rocket went, higher and higher. The air around Oliver turned from the white of day to the turquoise of twilight, and then into the deep black of space. The rocket slowed, and Oliver leaned out the box. Below him, the earth glowed blue and green, just like the globe in his big brother's bedroom. To his left, the moon sat peacefully, like a round, hole-covered sponge. And to his right twinkled all the stars of the universe. Big stars, small stars, yellow stars, red stars, all twinkling, all surrounded by stardust. "This is rocket to ground control. This is rocket to ground control. Do you read me?" "Quack!" "Great. Set navigation systems towards the stars, please." "Quack!" The rocket turned towards the stars and once more built up speed. Oliver picked up his lunchbox and leaned out the rocket, holding it out. As he moved through space, he watched as the lunchbox slowly began to fill with gold and silver and light. Stardust. When it was almost full, Oliver snapped the lid shut and tucked the box safely into the rocket. "Mission complete, ground control. Prepare to return journey." "Quack!" Oliver felt the rocket turn. He could see the earth in front of him. As it began to get bigger, he began to relax. Suddenly, the radio burst into life. "Quack! Quack! Quack!" Quack! He scanned the horizon and sure enough, another spaceship was heading in his direction. Not a rocket this time, but a flying saucer. A lime green spinning disc with glass dome on top. As the saucer got closer, Oliver could see that he was being driven by a ferocious-looking alien, at least 4 eyes, probably 9 arms, and certainly the snottiest nose you have ever seen. Alien attack, ground control, take evasive action! Oliver's rocket dived left, then right, trying to shake off the flying saucer. He fell into a pitch drop and then swooped back up again. This completely confused the alien, but also span the lunchbox full of Stardust out of Oliver's rocket. The alien changed direction and chased after the lunchbox. "Ground control, the alien is after the Stardust!" yelled Oliver. "Quack!" With an extra burst of speed, Oliver powered the rocket forward towards the alien and towards the precious Stardust. Closer and closer, he got the flying saucer, but the alien didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the lunchbox. With a last boost of energy, Oliver shot past the saucer and gave it a gigantic kick. The alien spaceship fell into a furious spin, round and round, faster and faster, until the glass dome was so covered in snot that the alien could no longer see. Oliver reached out a hand and grabbed for the lunchbox. "Time to head home, ground control." Quack! Oliver looked over his shoulder at the flying saucer behind him, no longer moving, with some very cross words being shouted from within. The rocket aimed towards the earth, then his country, then his village, then finally he could see the open roof of his house. With some expert driving, Oliver landed the rocket perfectly in the middle of his bedroom floor. He climbed out of his rocket, took off his cycling helmet, and gave an enormous yawn. "I'm tired, ground control. I think it's time for bed." Quack. The next morning, Oliver's dad woke him up bright and early. "I see you were playing spaceships last night, were you? I'm afraid Colonel Simpkins might not be so lucky today. They still haven't found any Stardust. But let's go to the launch site anyway. We can go and look at the Stevenson." It was a long drive to where the rocket was supposed to launch from, and Oliver sat quietly thinking to himself, perhaps they wouldn't be able to see an actual launch, but they would be able to see the Stevenson, and maybe, just maybe, they might get to see Colonel Simpkins himself. The red and blue rocket towered in front of them as they parked up and walked to the launch pad. It was as tall as 5 houses and as glossy as a new car. Oliver couldn't take his eyes off it. It was amazing. He and his dad stood against the railings of the launch site and watched as the white coats and boring ties scuttled about in front of the Stevenson. Good morning, everybody. Sorry there's no launch today for you. My mission is delayed until we find some Stardust, I'm afraid." A deep voice boomed in a deep chest. It was Colonel Simpkins. He walked along the railings, shaking hands with people and patting boys and girls on the head, thanking them for coming. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Oliver's dad said as Colonel Simpkins shook his hand in a firm grip. "My son is a huge fan of yours." "Is that so?" he said, placing a hand on Oliver's shoulder. "And what is your name?" "Oliver," said Oliver. "And I've brought you this." Oliver reached down to his side and pulled his lunchbox out of his bag. He handed it to Colonel Simpkins, watching as everything around twinkled. "What is this? Stardust? How on earth?" said Colonel Simpkins with great surprise. "Oliver, how did you get that?" Oliver's dad looked even more surprised than Colonel Simpkins. By now, Colonel Simpkins was yelling at white coats and boring ties. Action was everywhere, and the excitement was building. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a launch today, and all thanks to this young man." As Colonel Simpkins said this, thousands of eyes looked appreciatively at Oliver, and the TV cameras swung to see who this little blonde-haired boy was who had saved the mission. Oliver and his dad were invited into ground control to watch the launch up close. It was impossibly exciting. Colonel Simpkins fastened himself in, and the countdown began. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff! The Stevenson roared into the air, piercing the clouds and heading out into the space beyond. The noise was enormous and filled every part of Oliver's ears, making him feel as if it was him who was blasting off. Once the Stevenson was safely in space, Colonel Simpkins radioed ground control and asked to speak to Oliver. "Now, young man, I just wanted to say a final thank you to you. Without you, this mission would not have happened." Oliver looked at his dad, looked at Colonel Simpkins on the big screen in front of him, and at all the people in ground control now staring at him. He picked up the radio and simply said, "Quack." The end.